Let's talk a little bit again about growing up.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
How do we grow up?
Yeah.
I mean, going from being a spoiled, self-centered adolescent to a mature adult who begins to care about life. Well, I think first it requires a deep introspection. We have to really begin to think deeply about who we are and why we're here.
The two basic questions.
Yeah. But we have to really think about it. So, for example, I got to that point in my own development as a young man where I felt where if I didn't find out to the answer to that question, it wouldn't be worth living. So we have to really realize that unless we find the answers to some of the most important philosophical and spiritual questions, it's inevitable that we're going to make a mess out of it. And people do, and most people do make a big mess out of it because we don't know what we're doing. We have everything. We've been given everything. You know, we've been given the gift of education, of wealth, the freedom to do whatever, more or less anything we want to do. We can go anywhere, more or less, that we want to. I mean, we are the privileged generation. I mean, in the last 20 or 30 years, 40 years, there's been millions of us that have had a level of privilege, freedom and education, freedom of choice that's never existed before. There's never been a group of human beings like us. I feel that when we look back at how well we've done, I don't think we've done that well.
But this privilege made us confused. This is what, let's say, I'm talking about myself, this is what made me confused. I mean, my father had no privilege. He was in the war, he had to run away, he came to Israel, he built the country, thank you very much, and then he went to sleep at night. That's what he did.
Exactly.
When I wake up in the morning, I've got everything around me. It's a whole big supermarket.
Right.
That makes me confused.
Of course. That's why the philosophical and spiritual development is essential, and moral development is essential in order for us to begin to learn how to make the right choices for the right reasons. I mean, it's really a big problem.
Yeah, but this is very nice theoretically, but most
I'm not talking about theoretically. We have to do it.
Maybe it's a matter of stages, but first of all, I want to make myself better. I want to make my angers, my frustrations, my
I don't believe you.
Why is that?
Most people don't really want to, quote-unquote, make themselves better people. The only reason anybody's going to truly strive to become a better person is if they find a very big reason to do so. So usually,
what do you mean a big reason to do so?
Well, there has to be a reason beyond how you feel about yourself. So a lot of people, because they suffer psychological, emotional pain and fear, they want to feel better. But wanting to feel better doesn't mean you want to be a better person. It means you don't want to suffer.
That's right.
Just because you don't want to suffer, that does not automatically mean you want to be a better person.
Yeah, but most of the people, most of the spiritual paths that are now open for us talk about that.
But most of the spiritual paths that are available cater the postmodern narcissist. It's just another option.
Yeah.
It's just another way to feel better about yourself. It doesn't really challenge the very notion we have about ourselves, so that we'll be able to really embrace a larger reason for being that really is not self-serving.
But isn't there any other way? I mean, in your point of view, you have to go into a higher level. You have to grow up. You have to be more mature.
You have to strive to become more mature.
But if I need to strive, this is a very big leap for me. If I'm doing
the world's in a crisis, man, isn't it?
I feel it on a daily basis. I know the world is in a crisis, but my life is in a crisis before.
But just a minute. Yeah. If the thing is, if you really take in the whole picture, personally, I'm in a crisis. The world's in a crisis. All right? I'm part of the world. That means I don't have time. The reality is, I don't actually have time to carry on with my self-concern and my problems because I have to get my act together for the sake of the fact that we're in a crisis together.
Yeah, but
I don't have 10, 15, 20 years to work out my problems. I have to get it together now.
But you're talking about the most basic thing about humanity. It's about taking care about yourself. Who do you rescue before? Okay, if we're on a boat, do you rescue yourself or do you rescue the world? Most of the people, especially in Israel, would first of all rescue themselves. So I'm asking you, how can you persuade people who naturally want to save themselves first to go to a higher level? The world is over there. My life is over here. I want to deal with my life.
The worldview has to be exploded.
Sorry?
The worldview has to be exploded. So, well, for example, what does it mean for an Israeli? So, for an Israeli, he or she feels, my way of life and the way I know it's being threatened because of this local problem. But I think more Israelis need to see their own predicament as part of this larger global crisis. Don't you think that's part of the problem?
Yeah, I can see it's part of the problem. I'm asking you, how can you persuade somebody to do that when your own problems are just knocking on the door? I mean, this is different. I mean,
Einstein himself said the only way to solve a problem is to find a solution that comes from a higher level than the one that the problem emerged at. He was a good Jew.
And in some way, I don't know why, it sounds a little bit like the philosophy of the kibbutz. You know the kibbutz in Israel.
There are a lot of similarities because the whole notion of the kibbutz is not just living for yourself, but living for a larger purpose. Yes,
and that,
absolutely.
And that didn't work out too well.
But the way I'm saying is imagine the kibbutz here is the whole cosmos.
All right. Yeah.
So we expand a little kibbutz with 50 or 1,000 people, and expand that to being the whole cosmos. And in the way I approach this is I try and help people to look at their own human existence from nothing less than a cosmocentric context, that we're part of a 14 billion year process that's gone from energy, light, to matter, to life, to consciousness. So who you are, you're really 14 billion years old, and so am I. I said, really? And it's taken 14 billion years for the universe to produce a life form that has the capacity for self-reflective awareness that would make it possible for us to have this kind of discussion. And they say, wow. So it's the context in which we think about what it means to be human has to become really big. You see what I'm saying? It has in the form of an experience of that fact, and also in terms of expanding the way we think about these things. And we also have to realize that the process really needs us. It's not just a high ideal, but it's literally true. If you want to know what's going to happen to the future, well, if you and I don't change, what's going to happen is what's happening right now, which means we're not going to make it. I mean, it's obvious. Just look around. So the change has to happen, and the first change that has to happen is at the level of consciousness, because if we haven't evolved enough to appreciate that the problems we're facing demand a much bigger view in order to be able to address them. And that bigger view is going to only come when individuals actually develop. And you and I have to do that now.
But in order to let go of all my personal, small...
You pretend your house is surrounded by Palestinians who want to kill you and your family, right? And drink your blood, okay?
Yeah, well, I live around the corner. It could be, by the way, yeah.
Okay, but you imagine, but actually those aren't Palestinians, you see. That's the human predicament of the 21st century, you see.
Yeah, but
you see my point?
Yeah,
it has to do with our survival as a global culture, okay?
But in order to emphasize with what you're saying, I have to let go of some of my most genuine beliefs about myself.
Like what?
Like that we are in danger here, that I'm a Jew, that my own personal identity has to be left because it doesn't really matter if we're looking at it at 14 billion years time.
No, it all matters. No, but the point is, you're a Jew, okay?
Yeah.
You're a Jew, aren't you? You're a Jew.
I admit.
Right, but the Jew is a member of a particular tribe, right? But that tribe is also part of the human race. So is it more important to be a member of a particular tribe, or is it more important ultimately to be a member of the human race?
It is more important to be a member of the human race.
Okay, just a minute. So then the context gets bigger. So then you even consider the whole idea of being a Jew in a much bigger context, right? And then you realize the human race is, as far as we know, the highest and most evolved expression of the life process that's been part of a 14 billion year developmental event, right? And then you start to see all this, and then you see as a planetary culture and as a species, we're in a lot of trouble. So you start to think about your own problems in a bigger context, and the idea here is your own problems don't go away, but the context in which you consider your own personal problems, you begin to see them in a bigger and bigger context. That's where the strength comes from to make changes. You have to understand there's no gimmick to this.
Yeah, of course.
You see, if you want to just, if it's going to be a small thing, you can give to someone a gimmick, but there's no gimmick in getting someone to really grow up. You have to put your hands on their shoulders, look in their faces, and say, don't you realize who you are? Don't you realize what this is? It's not a game, it's not a joke. This is real.
Yeah, but growing up, just this last question, growing up is something that it takes time. I look at my friend's baby. I can't make him, when he's crawling, I can't tell him, all right, now read this. He's crawling, it needs time, it needs development.
But listen, when, for example, Israel is at war, when any group of people are threatened, it's possible for a young man to grow up and become very mature, because he has to, because everybody's threatened, okay? Now, what we have to do is look at that same possibility emerges when we realize that the process itself is desperate for our own maturity, we say, I have to do this, because when we realize it's important enough, we do it because we
It's a
have
must,
to.
yeah.
It's for the same reason.
Yeah.
But very few people are willing to do that. They're much more willing to pick up a gun when we have to protect ourselves, when we're being physically threatened. But what about when we're being threatened in a much bigger way, in a much more profound way as a species, you see? Then we get, it's a lot harder for us to hold that in our minds because our thinking is so small. But we have to find that kind of big-heartedness. We have to connect with reality in a much deeper way.
So let's pray that we shall find this big heart.
Let's not pray.
Let's
do it.
Just do it.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm going to do it right now.
Okay, thanks.